This one is mine. That was it. That was the entire sentence. No explanation, no context. Just 4 words spoken so quietly that people in the back had to lean forward to make sure they'd heard correctly, and one name that made the declaration absolute. Sienna Worthington. The silence wasn't polite. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from people being respectful or well-mannered. It was the silence of collective understanding. It was the silence of a room full of people who all suddenly realized they just witnessed a declaration of war, and the war was about a girl who'd been invisible 30 seconds before. Sienna felt it like a physical thing, the weight of 40 pairs of eyes, the shift in the air, the way her stepmother Lenore's face went slack. She couldn't breathe. Her lungs had forgotten how. But to understand why those 5 words mattered so much, we need to go back. We need to go back to 40 minutes earlier when Sienna didn't matter at all. She was counting the crystals in the chandelier again. 22 years old, and she was hiding behind a service staircase at her father's gala, counting crystals, because it was better than facing the fact that she'd been invited to a party she didn't belong at, wearing a dress she hadn't chosen, at an event her father hadn't actually wanted her to attend. The chandelier has 42,000 crystals, she whispered to herself. She'd counted them when she was 15 too. That night, her mother had been dying in a hospital across town. That night, her father had thrown the party anyway. Nothing had changed. Lenore found her before she could finish her count. Her stepmother appeared like a knife in heels, that smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Try not to embarrass your father tonight, darling," Lenore said, handing her the wine-colored dress. "People will be watching." People were always watching. That was the worst part. Sienna moved through the ballroom like something that didn't quite belong because she didn't. The women in white and ivory and champagne gold looked at her the way people look at stains on expensive carpet. The men didn't look at her at all. And then Lenore called her over to the champagne fountain. 3 other women stood there, dripping with diamonds and cruelty. Lenore made the introduction with the tone of someone introducing a mistake. "This is Sienna, my husband's, well, you know." The women made small noises of sympathy that weren't sympathy at all. "Oh, the daughter," one of them said. She was blonde, sharp-featured, wearing a necklace that probably cost more than the house Sienna's mother had died in. "I've heard so much about her." "I'm sure you have," Sienna said before she could stop herself. Lenore's eyes narrowed a fraction. It was the only warning she gave. "She has her mother's mouth," Lenore said lightly, and the women laughed. "Oh, the mother, what was she again?" "A teacher," someone said. "A dancer," another corrected. "A dancer, how charming. And did she dance with your father or just for him?" The laughter was louder this time. It was the kind of laughter that made Sienna's face burn, that made her hands curl into fists at her sides. Her mother had been a music teacher. She'd played piano in a church basement for free for 20 years because she believed children should have something beautiful in their lives, even if they had nothing else. Her mother had been worth 10 of every woman in this room. Her mother had died on a cracked vinyl hospital bed because her father hadn't sent the money for the better hospital in time. Sienna opened her mouth to say something, anything, and then she saw him. Her father was laughing with a senator across the room. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd walked in, but she knew he'd seen her. Arthur Worthington saw everything. He just never decided she was worth looking at twice. She excused herself quietly and walked away before the women could pretend to stop her. The balcony was empty, cold, dark. The Yarra River below was black and slow. She wrapped her bare arms around herself and tried to breathe. "Just a few more hours," she told herself. "Just survive a few more hours." The cold air hit her face, and for a moment she felt like maybe she could do this. Maybe she could get through one more night of being invisible in her own life. Then she heard the footsteps. Victor Blackwell stepped onto the balcony with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Sienna recognized his type immediately. She'd been avoiding his type for 5 years. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. "I'm fine, just needed air," she said. She meant it as goodbye. "Air's better in company." He moved closer. His hand came out and closed around her wrist before she even registered the motion. "I know who you are. Everybody knows who you are. You're Arthur's little secret, the one he doesn't guard very well." Sienna yanked her arm back. His grip tightened instead of loosening. "Don't," she said, "don't." "What?" His hand was too close to her face now, his breath bourbon-soaked. "You act like you're something. You're not. You're the help. You're—" "Get your hand off her." The voice came from the doorway, and it was quiet. It was the most dangerous sound Sienna had ever heard in her life. The man holding her wrist went white, absolutely white, his face drained of color like someone had flipped a switch. Standing in the doorway was a man in a black suit, not a tuxedo, just simple black that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dark hair cut short, a jaw like something carved, and eyes that were gray like a blade, like a stone at the bottom of a cold river. Sienna had never seen him before in her life, but the way Blackwell's entire body went rigid told her everything she needed to know about who was standing behind her. "Mr. Russo," Blackwell said, and his voice was shaking. I didn't realize." "That's not what you didn't realize," the man said. His voice was still quiet, still calm, still the most terrifying thing Sienna had ever heard. "What you didn't realize is that she's a person, and you have your hand on her. Take it off." The hand came off so fast Sienna stumbled. "I'll go," Blackwell said. He was already walking backward. "I'll just—" "You will. And tomorrow morning, you'll call my office. We need to have a conversation about what you thought you were doing in my city." "I'm sorry, I didn't know she was." "Walk away, Blackwell, before I decide I don't want you to." Blackwell walked so fast he almost tripped on the balcony door. And then Sienna was alone on a cold stone balcony, with a man whose name apparently was enough to make grown men run. She was shaking. She didn't want to be shaking. She hated that she was shaking, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was thinner than she wanted it to be. "You're not, you're shaking." "I'm cold." A small, almost invisible thing happened to the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the ghost of one. He took off his jacket, just took it off and held it out to her. "I don't need." "Take it." She took it. The jacket was warm from him and smelled like something clean and expensive. Cedar, maybe, and something darker underneath. She pulled it around her shoulders and it was much too big. "Thank you," she said. "What's your name?" "Sienna." "Sienna what?" She hesitated. Her name was a weapon in this room. Her name made people look at her the way the women at the champagne fountain had looked at her, but his gray eyes were steady and unreadable. "Worthington," she said. Something flickered in his face. It was there and gone so fast she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Arthur's daughter." "Arthur's bastard," she said. "Everyone makes sure to clarify." He looked at her for a long moment. "Dominic Russo," he said. She knew the name. Of course she knew the name. Everybody in this city knew the name Russo. The family had been in Melbourne since before Melbourne had skyscrapers. They owned shipping. They owned construction. They owned, if you believe the whispers, the docks and the unions and a substantial percentage of every judge who'd ever sat in a criminal court in the state. Her father had spoken the name Russo at the dinner table exactly once that she could remember. He'd spoken it the way other men spoke about hurricanes. Don't get in their way. Don't catch their attention. Don't make them decide they need you gone. And now Dominic Russo was standing on her father's balcony in his shirt sleeves, because his jacket was around her shoulders. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Stop Blackwell." "All of it, the balcony just now." Dominic tilted his head slightly. "He had his hand on you. You told him to let go. He didn't. Most men don't care about that. I'm not most men. That's not a reason. It's a reason. It's a reason you'd give to somebody else. Tell me the real one. But he was quiet for a long moment. The fire was very low. The sound of the ballroom was distant now. I knew your mother, he said finally. Sienna's head came up. What? I knew your mother. A long time ago. She taught my little sister piano for 2 years when my sister was 8. She was kind to my family at a time when my family was not a family people were kind to. Sienna's eyes burned. She hated that. She blinked hard. She never told me. She said she wouldn't have. She didn't know who we were. Not really. She just knew a child who wanted to learn. That sounds like her. It does, doesn't it? They stood in silence for a moment. Then he said something that made the entire world shift. I'm going to marry you, Sienna. She didn't understand the words at first. They went past her like a train. I'm sorry, what? I'm going to marry you. Or I'm going to ask to, and you're going to decide. But I want you to understand what I'm offering because it isn't a fairy tale. Dominic, I'm not finished. I'm offering you my name, my protection, a place at the top of this city. Your father cannot touch you. No Blackwell will ever be in a room with you again. You will never sit at the edge of anyone's ballroom for the rest of your life. He paused. In return, I need a wife. I need a woman at my side who is not afraid of this world and who can learn it and who can, when the time comes, be a partner to me in it. Not a decoration. A partner. I have watched you tonight, Sienna Worthington, and I believe you can be that. I believe you have been that your whole life and nobody has given you a room big enough to prove it in. She couldn't speak. You don't have to answer tonight, he said. You don't have to answer tomorrow, but you have to understand what I'm asking. This is not a kindness. This is not a rescue. I need what I'm asking you for, and I think you might need what I'm offering. He set a card on the little table beside her, thick cream paper, a phone number in black ink, no name. When you decide, he said, call that number day or night. Say yes or say no. Either answer will be heard and kept. He turned to leave. Dominic, she said. He stopped at the door. Why me? Out of every woman in that ballroom, why me? He looked at her for a long moment. Because when I told you I was going to kiss you, he said, I told you why, and you told me to mean it. Then he was gone. Sienna sat alone in the sitting room for a long time. The fire burned down to red coals. She couldn't stop touching the sleeve of his jacket. On the table, the card sat where he'd put it. When she finally stood up, she did it slowly. She picked up the card. She looked at the number. She put it very carefully into the small silk clutch her stepmother had loaned her. She walked out of the sitting room. She walked through the ballroom. And the ballroom was quieter now because people were already leaving, because an evening could not recover from what they'd just seen. Her father was standing at the foot of the grand staircase. He was not smiling. Sienna, he said. For the first time in her entire life, her name in his mouth sounded like he was saying the name of someone he didn't fully own. Yes, father. Come, we need to talk. She looked at him. She looked at him the way she had never in 22 years looked at him before. She looked at him like a stranger. No, father, she said, we don't. And she walked past him. She walked up the grand staircase because she needed to get to her room and get her bag. And she could feel him watching her, and for the first time in her life, the first time, she did not shrink under the watching. In the guest room, she took off the wine-colored dress. She folded it neatly on the bed. She put on her jeans and her sweater and her cheap black coat. She folded Dominic's tuxedo jacket over her arm because she wasn't going to leave it. Her hand went once to the silk clutch to the card inside it. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was pale. Her eyes were red. Her hair was coming down on one side. And she was for the first time in her life looking at a woman who had a choice. She did not know yet what she was going to choose, but she knew with absolute certainty that she was going to be the one who chose it. The subway at 1 in the morning smelled like wet concrete and old newsprint. Sienna sat in the corner of the car with her cheap black coat buttoned up to her chin, and Dominic's tuxedo jacket folded across her lap like a secret. The fluorescent light flickered. Somewhere the train hit a bad rail and the whole car lurched. She put a hand down on the jacket to keep it from sliding off, and she realized her hand was still shaking. She looked out the black window at her own reflection. The woman looking back at her did not look like a woman who had just walked out of Arthur Worthington's house. She looked the way she had always looked, pale, tired, a little hungry, hair coming down on one side. But her eyes were different. The train pulled into her stop. She climbed 3 flights of stairs to her studio apartment. She stood in the middle of it in her coat, and she didn't turn the light on. The card was in her clutch. She took it out. She set it on the little kitchen table where she ate her cereal. She sat down across from it, still in her coat, and she looked at it the way you look at something that might bite you. A phone number, no name, black ink on cream paper. It should not have weighed as much as it did. She thought about what he had said. She thought about the way he had said it, not romantic, not pleading, not even particularly kind. I am not offering you a fairy tale. I need what I am asking you for. I think you might need what I am offering. She had liked that, and she hated that she had liked that. Sweet words were cheap. She had eaten sweet words from her father her whole life, promises he forgot by morning. Dominic Russo had not given her sweet words. He had given her a straight cold accounting, and he had told her that she could say no. She had never, not once in 22 years, been told she could say no to anything that mattered. She picked up the card, she put it down, she picked it up again. If you've made it this far, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. This is just the hook. The real story is about to get so much darker, so much bigger. Sienna Worthington is about to discover things about her mother, about her father, about herself that will change everything she thought she knew. So tell me, where are you watching from? Her phone buzzed on the table and she almost screamed. It was Raina, her best friend. The text said, "You alive, Bennett?" Sienna almost cried from the sheer human normalness of it. She wrote back, "Yes, weird night." The dots appeared, define weird. Sienna stared at the phone for a long time. Then she wrote, "I think I might get married." The dots disappeared, came back, disappeared again. Then her phone rang. "Sienna," Raina said when she picked up, "if that was a joke, it was a bad one and I will beat you." "It's not a joke." "Then put shoes on because I'm getting into a cab." Raina arrived 40 minutes later with a bottle of bad wine, a bag of gas station popcorn, and the expression of a best friend who had been mentally rehearsing questions the entire cab ride. She took one look at Sienna, at her red eyes, at the tuxedo jacket on the chair, at the card on the table, and she dropped everything on the counter. "Okay," Raina said, "tell me everything from the top." Sienna told her about the dress, about the women at the champagne fountain, about the balcony and Blackwell's hand on her wrist, about the voice behind him, about the man in black, about the jacket, about the dance, about the kiss that felt like the world ending, about the sitting room with the low fire and the words, "I'm going to marry you." When she was finished, Raina sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "Okay," Raina said. "Okay, I need a second, my brain's catching up." She took a long drink straight from the wine bottle. "Sienna, that's Dominic Russo. That's Dominic Russo." "I know. That's Dominic Russo. My cousin Marco delivers seafood to one of his restaurants. He told me once he saw Dominic Russo eat dinner, just eat dinner, and he said the whole dining room ate quieter. It's a whole thing." "Raina, you can't, but you're thinking about it." Sienna didn't answer. "Oh my God, you're thinking about it." "I'm not." "You're looking at the card." I'm allowed to look at the card. But you haven't thrown it away. Sienna pressed her fingers into her temples. Raina, you weren't there. You didn't see the way my father looked at me. You didn't see those women. You didn't see Blackwell with his hand on me. And then Dominic walked in and made him beg with a sentence. And then he gave me his jacket because I was cold. The man is a criminal, Sienna. I know what he is. And you know what? From where I was standing tonight, the criminals were wearing my father's last name. The room went quiet. Raina put the bottle down. She rubbed her eyes. That's fair, she said. That's fair, I'm sorry. It's okay. It's not okay. I shouldn't have. I know what Arthur is. I've always known what Arthur is. But I don't want you to trade one cage for a prettier one, Sienna. That's all. I don't care if he kissed you like the world was ending. I don't care if he looked at you like you were the last real thing in a room full of fakes. You've been in a cage your whole life. I want you out. Not in a new one. Out. Sienna sat down on the bed next to her friend. She leaned her head on Raina's shoulder. I don't know what I'm going to do, she said quietly. I know, I'm not going to call him tonight. Good. But I'm not going to throw the card away tonight either. Raina was silent for a moment. Then she said, Okay, you're 22 years old, Sienna. Tonight is the first night in the 6 years I've known you that I have heard you say I'm not going to about something that mattered. You're not throwing the card away. Fine. You're not calling him either. Also fine. Both of those are decisions. And I'm not going to be the one who takes your first real decision away from you. 3 days later, something happened. Sienna was walking home from the diner at 4 in the afternoon when she realized she was being followed. She didn't know how she knew. There was a feeling at the back of her neck, a crawl, an itch. She glanced in the reflection of a storefront window. Behind her, half a block back, a man was walking in the same rhythm she was. Tall, heavy-set, dark coat. She turned a corner she didn't usually turn. He turned it too. Her heart started to hammer. She went into a coffee shop. She ordered a black coffee she didn't want. She sat at a table near the window and she waited. He didn't come in. He stood across the street pretending to look at a phone, pretending not to watch her. She knew him. She realized she knew him. She had not seen his face the other night on the balcony, not really, but she remembered a shape. She remembered the breadth of the shoulders. It was Blackwell, or one of Blackwell's men, which was the same thing. Her hand went into her coat pocket. The card was there. It had been there for 3 days. She had carried it with her without admitting she was carrying it with her. She pulled it out. She looked at the number she dialed. It rang once. Russo. Just one word, low, quick, not a question. Dominic, she said, it's Sienna. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not a long silence, but it was a full one. Sienna, where are you? She told him. She told him about the man. She told him she was pretty sure he was with Blackwell. Stay where you are, Dominic said. Don't go to the bathroom. Don't go to the counter. Sit in the window where I can see you when I come in and sit facing the door. Okay. Sienna. Yes. I'm glad you called. The line clicked. She sat in the window. She sat facing the door. She did not touch her coffee. Her hands were in her lap and she watched the door and she watched the man across the street. And 7 minutes later, the black car pulled up at the curb. Lorenzo got out from the driver's side. And Dominic, in a plain wool coat this time, got out of the back. He did not even look at her through the window. He looked across the street at the man pretending to read his phone. The man looked up. The man saw Dominic Russo. The man turned and walked away so fast he almost jogged. Dominic watched him go. He did not send Lorenzo after him. He just watched the man turn the corner and disappear. And then, only then, he walked into the coffee shop. Sienna stood up from her chair before she knew she was going to. Sit, he said gently. She sat. He took the chair across from her. Lorenzo stayed outside. standing on the sidewalk with his hands folded in front of him, looking at nothing and watching everything. "Are you hurt?" Dominic asked. "No." "Were you touched?" "No, he was just following." Dominic nodded slowly. He looked at her untouched coffee. He looked at her face. "I told you at the end of Sunday night," he said, "that the Blackwell of this city would not touch you. I meant it. I didn't think it was going to be tested this fast." "It's not your fault." "It is a little. I made a public point. Some people are going to take that as an invitation to test it. That's horrifying." "That's the world your father raised you in. That's the world I live in. I'm not going to lie to you about it." She looked down at her hands. "The photograph," she said quietly. "Where did you get it?" "My sister. She kept everything from her lessons. Every piano book, every recital program. A few pictures your mother gave her over the years. When I told her who your mother's daughter was, she went through a box for half the night. She wanted me to send it." "What's her name, your sister?" Sophia Russo. Sophia now anyway, she married, she has a son." "Does she know about what I saw at the gala, about what you did?" "She knows I came. She knows what I offered you. She's angry with me about it." "Why?" "Because she thinks I should not have asked a woman whose mother she loved to marry me for reasons that were not love." Sienna felt something in her chest catch on itself. "What did you tell her?" she said. "I told her I agreed with her, and that I had asked anyway because I had run out of time to be picky about how I kept people safe." He leaned back in his chair. "Take you to a small restaurant," he said. "In Little Italy. No sign on the door. I want to tell you some things. I want to tell you why that man followed you today. I want to tell you about my father. I want to tell you about the real reason I was at that party." She nodded. "Will you come?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll come." He paid for her untouched coffee. They left the shop. Lorenzo drove them to a restaurant that didn't exist on any map, and when they walked in, the owner came out of the kitchen, wiped her hands on her apron, kissed Dominic on both cheeks, and looked at Sienna with a long, thoughtful look. She sat them at a table in the back. She brought a bottle of wine Dominic didn't order and a plate of bread under a cloth. "She's looked at me my whole life like I'm still 7 years old," Dominic said. "That's not going to stop." "It's nice," Sienna said. "It is." He poured her a glass of wine. "My father died in February," he said. Sienna's hand stopped mid-reach for the glass. "Official story is he died of a heart attack. That is not exactly wrong. It is not, however, the entire story. My family's business, the legitimate parts and the other parts, has been for 40 years an uneasy agreement between 3 families. The Russos, the DeLocos, the Santangelos. The details aren't important to you tonight. What is important is that the agreement only ever worked because my father was the one holding it together. He was the man everyone else was afraid of. Not me. Not yet." He paused. "He died, and within 48 hours, 2 people tried to kill my sister's son. He's 4. His name is Luca. He likes dinosaurs. 2 men in a white sedan tried to grab him off a sidewalk in front of his preschool." Sienna put down her glass. "The men did not succeed. I made sure they did not succeed. I also made sure those men will not try anything like it again. The agreement my father held together is cracking. The DeLocos are cautious. They will wait. The Santangelos are not. They have a new head, a man named Marco Santangelo, who believes my father's death is an opportunity." He looked at her across the candles. "The Blackwell who was on that balcony Sunday night was not there by accident. He was there to watch me. He was there to see if I would react. And when I did, when I made myself visible, I made a choice that turned protecting you into something public." "You used me," Sienna said slowly. "No, listen to the words. I said what I did in response was not only a kindness. I could have walked past that balcony. I could have let Blackwell do what Blackwell was doing. I didn't. I stopped because I looked at your face and I saw a girl who looked exactly the way my sister looked once a long time ago when we did not have anybody. And then yes, having stopped, having made myself visible, I made a decision that turned my protecting you into something public. I did that for two reasons. One, because it sent Blackwell's people a message I wanted them to have. Two, because it made you, as of Sunday night, the most conspicuous woman in this city, which means you are also now the most dangerous woman in this city for anyone to hurt. She stared at him. So it was a transaction. It was not only a transaction, Sienna. Please listen to what I'm actually saying. It was also the first time in 7 months that I looked at another human being and felt like someone in the room was not trying to use me, and I wanted to give whatever that was a name. I wanted to sit down across from it. I wanted to know it. I am 34 years old, Sienna, and I have not been able to say that sentence about a single person I have met since February. And then I walked onto that balcony. She was quiet for a very long time. I don't know what to say to that, she said. You don't have to say anything. You're supposed to just decide. You want to walk out of this restaurant and never see me again and go back to your apartment and your diner and your friend Raina. You can do that. I will put 2 of my people on you from a distance for the next month because what happened today tells me I have to, and after that month I will pull them back and you will never see me again. That is an option. Okay. You want to say yes to what I asked you on Sunday. That is an option too. It is the option I am hopping you take. I am not going to pretend I am not hopping, but it is not the option you are required to take for any other reason. And what if I don't know yet? Then you don't know yet. That's not an answer. It's the only honest answer I have. You don't have to know tonight. You don't have to know this week. The offer does not expire. She looked up from her wine. Dominic. Yes. I want to ask you something and I want you to tell me the truth. Not a careful truth. The truth. All right. If I had been ugly on Sunday, if I had been plain, if I had been the wrong age, if I had been anybody but who I was, would you still have stopped Blackwell? He did not hesitate. Yes. Would you have kissed me? No. Would you have asked me to marry you? No. So the answer is, you used my face. Sienna, you asked me to be honest, not to be flattering. Yes, the way you looked up at me on that balcony mattered. Yes, the way you talked to me in the sitting room mattered. Yes, you are beautiful. And yes, you have your mother's eyes. And yes, all of it went into a decision I made in 30 minutes that I don't get to take back. I'm not going to pretend I stopped Blackwell because of your eyes. I stopped Blackwell because he was wrong. But what came after the dance, the kiss, the sitting room, the card? What came after was a decision about you, the specific you. Not a woman, a person. Sienna's eyes were burning. Okay, she said. Okay, I'm going to say something now. All right. I'm not saying yes tonight, but I'm not saying no either. I want to know you, Dominic, before I say anything. I want to eat dinner with you more than once. I want to meet your sister if she'll meet me. I want to see how you talk to Lorenzo when you think I'm not listening. I want to know what you look like on a Sunday afternoon when nobody is trying to kill your nephew. I am 22 years old, and every decision anyone has ever made about me has been made by somebody else. And I'm not going to make the first one of my own after one dance and one kiss and one photograph of my mother. I'm not. Dominic Russ looked at her across the candle for a very long moment. And then he smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen on his face. It didn't even quite reach both corners of his mouth, but it did something to the gray in his eyes that made her remember the kiss in the ballroom. That's the best answer anybody has given me in 7 months, he said. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It wasn't a thing you said because you were afraid of me or because you were afraid of your father. That's what makes it the best answer. They ate dinner. They talked about his father, about the business, about what it meant to be the head of a family at 34. They talked about her mother, about the years her mother had spent teaching piano for free, about the fact that she'd never known about Dominic's sister until that photograph. And when he drove her home, when he walked her to her door, he didn't try to kiss her again. He just looked at her. "Tomorrow," he said, 12:30, "I'll send Lorenzo. He'll bring you to Sophia's. We're having lunch." "Okay," she said. "Sleep, Sienna." "I don't know if I will." "Try." He turned and walked down the stairs, and she watched him go, and she did not this time feel like anyone was leaving. She felt like a door had been left open. And whether or not she walked through it, whether or not she ran back to her old life, was going to be, for the first time in her life, her choice and her choice alone. If you're enjoying this so far, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I know we're not done yet. Sienna's story is about to get so much darker, because tomorrow at Sophia's house, everything changes. There's a revelation coming, a truth about her mother that will rewrite everything she thought she knew, and a choice that will define who she becomes for the rest of her life. So hit that subscribe button and the like button if you're invested in Sienna's story. I want to know in the comments, do you think she should say yes to Dominic, or is Raina right to be worried? Let me know. She closed her apartment door. She leaned her back against it. On the kitchen table, the photograph of her mother was still where she'd left it that morning. And beside it, the card with the number. She stood there for a long time. And then, very quietly, she sat down on her bed and she closed her eyes and she waited for the future to arrive. It would arrive faster than she expected. It would change everything. And standing on that balcony 7 years later, married to the man who'd saved her, with a daughter who played piano and a hospital wing named after her mother and a life that was entirely, completely, absolutely hers, Sienna Worthington would understand something fundamental. The people who'd spent 22 years telling her she was nothing had not been telling her the truth about her. They had been telling her the truth about themselves. And she had finally stopped listening. Like, subscribe, and comment. Tell me, what was your favorite moment in Sienna's story? The moment on the balcony, the revelation about her mother, the moment she told her father no. I want to hear from you. This is what happens when a girl who's been invisible her whole life finally decides to be seen. What's your moment? When are you going to stop listening to the people who say you're nothing?